So, topic of faith. I want to continue to tell my story, which I started, not sure it was last week or the week before, um, where I'd spoken about the first retreat I did when I was a graduate student in Boston, and the two teachers somehow embodied something that I recognized I wanted, and that it opened up really the possibility of freedom, awakening for me as a young man. Though I had started meditating 6 months earlier, someone had taught me to meditate, and they had talked about awakening and sort of gave it a self-improvement pitch. But there's something very different about seeing it embodied in some way that touched my heart and opened me to it. And then I spoke about a retreat, which was actually only about 4 months later, where I kind of went in a tortured state of mind. And there was a moment where it all turned around. And that was the first time where I clearly knew it. I'm sure many times that my heart has been open and there's been wisdom there, but there was some way it was so clear because it was this sudden switch from being tortured in mind to being like in the heart intelligence. And it was loving of me, and it was loving of everybody else, and loving of the people who had been involved in this particular mess and interpersonal mess. And so that was another kind of awakening, just to this is possible. And I also mentioned on that when I was talking about that first retreat, this realization that I had that at the time I was a graduate student in theology, and I suddenly realized, what I really wanted in this life is not to know about God. I wanted to know God. I wanted to actually have an experience and live in that experience, not just temporarily. I wanted to have, I knew what I wanted. I used those terms for it, but, and I have to say, from thenceforth, it took me many years to kind of get out of the profession of academic theologian, but thenceforth, something shifted in me. I actually went through a depression. And out of that, I did another 2-week retreat, which was also quite profound. And I decided that I would drop out of graduate school and do a 3-month silent retreat, and then go to Asia after that. And there was just suddenly this plan, like this escape plan, came into my mind. It was rather drastic, but I just felt like I had to abandon the course that I'd set for myself. To be true to something, I knew inside. And it was interesting because I did it such, it was the third year of my doctoral program, and I arranged to do my doctoral comprehensives at the end of the spring semester before my leave of absence. I took a leave of absence, not exactly dropping out, but I wasn't going to be there the following year. And I was depressed right up until the day I woke up to take those exams. And I woke up, I took the exams. They go for like 3 days of written and 1 of oral. And for some reason, I wasn't depressed. And I wasn't depressed after that either, once I was like free of this program. Should have told me a lot. There's something that had been weighing on my heart. And so there I was. I worked all that summer to earn some money. And I headed off to Insight Meditation Society, Barre, Massachusetts, for a 3-month retreat. And hang with me, this all has to do with faith. I think there's a lot of faith just in that, just in like leaving the course that you set for yourself, kind of realizing it's not right. There's a kind of a faith there. You actually know what your calling is. You actually know where you belong in this world. We don't often give ourselves credit for that. And we often can fight that in various ways, do what we think we're supposed to. And there were certainly parts of me that thought I was supposed to stay there in graduate school, but I just kind of let go of that. And I wasn't sure I was going back. So here I show up at this Buddhist center, and it's pretty intense, a 3-month silent retreat, I have to say. You're sitting in meditation and doing walking meditation all day long, and it's silent. You're not talking to anybody. There were 2 times when I broke silence during the week. One was with an interview with a teacher, one-on-one, and the other was with a group interview. And other than that, I was completely silent. So you're completely kind of stuck with yourself. You're stuck with your mind, which is part of the point. You actually spend your time observing what goes on inside your mind and doing the meditation to calm it and to bring yourself into a state where you can observe deeply the nature of life. So that's kind of the point. But so I showed up at this, and the first 2 weeks were fine. By the end of 2 weeks on this sort of thing, you're so kind of in the present moment that time doesn't mean anything anymore. At the beginning, it was like, oh my God, I got to do this for 3 months. But after about 2 weeks, I was settled in. So that thought didn't even mean anything anymore. It was just the next hour and the next day, the next sitting wasn't so far ahead. But when that happens, when you really settle in, and when the mind and the heart really know that you're there, you can open up to things inside that maybe you wouldn't get to, or maybe they'd trouble you, but you could never really quite face them. And so what I discovered kind of opened up. At various points, I would be haunted by this thought that I was losing my soul. Now, those of you who grew up Catholic might recognize this thought. There's a lot of talk about saving your soul and losing your soul, and sin and redemption and all those sorts of things. And I must say that I was somewhat protected from it by a liberal mother who was very interested in Judaism and read a lot about Judaism, and she kind of gave me a different perspective on things. But I certainly got the other in Catholic school, which I was in for 2 years, and Mass. And it was a very conservative parish, German, not Irish. So they didn't have quite the authoritarian thing I sometimes think the Irish do. But nonetheless, there was a kind of a grimness about it, and hold yourself a certain way carefully. And I didn't really know that was in myself, but there it was on this retreat, this moment where I would feel terror. It was really a panic attack that would happen suddenly. I would be meditating, or I'd be walking, and I'd suddenly become overcome with this thought, oh my God, I'm subjecting myself to this Buddhist teaching. I'm going to lose my soul. And they're brainwashing me right now. I know they are. And the mind would kind of like spin ahead and create this horrible kind of scenario. And meanwhile, my heart would be pounding, and I'd be feeling this fear. And it's like, should I pick up my stuff and hop in the car and drive away? What should I do? And then it would kind of lift and go away for a while, and I would go back to practicing, and it didn't quite seem so visceral. But when it would hit me, it would like really be visceral. I would be in this state of terror. And I was curious about that too, because it would come and go. It would rise up, seize me. But then, after I just kind of do the practice of walking meditation and coming back to feeling the walking, noticing the breathing, something about it would kind of lighten up and it would dissipate. And I might have a couple of days which were not full of that. And then it would come back. So there was a moment when this seized me. But for some reason, it had come and gone enough times that it like seized me. And there was like a chunk of presence with it that hadn't been there before. I was really seeing it for what it was. And I felt this wisdom come forth from me, really the heart intelligence. I felt it like come forward and meet this error and say, Mark, you know that what you're doing is wholesome, that it's wholesome to cultivate mindfulness and presence. There's nothing unwholesome about that. There's nothing unwholesome about teaching your mind to stay put, not wander around all the time. There's nothing unwholesome. In fact, it's very wholesome, the loving kindness chant that you do every evening. You know all of this is wholesome. If this is somehow in conflict with Christianity, what does that say about Christianity? And it left it at that. That was like the last word it had to say. And it's like a trance was suddenly broken. It was like, oh my goodness, I can actually trust my own discernment of what is wholesome and unwholesome. And it banished the doubt, just banished it. It never came back on that 3-month retreat. Other stuff came back. I won't go into it tonight, or probably any night necessarily. It was a long 3 months. And so different things inside would come up. But this one, this like grip on me, I completely let go. And I felt like I possessed myself again. Like I'd been possessed by a thought. A thought had been inserted into my mind from outside, a dogmatic thought, a scary thought. And it was controlling me. And something inside saw through it and released it. And I trusted that. I trusted that voice that came from my heart. It came with an innate trustworthiness. I recognized it. This is wisdom. This other, this is crazy. This sense that one can, by not sticking to exactly what one is told, one is somehow going to burn in hell, say that. I could feel the unwholesomeness of that teaching. It inserts fear in people's hearts. I could feel that. I could know that. I could make that discernment. And somehow I broke free. So I tell this in a class on faith because people are often very confused about the nature of faith. And faith is often taught as believe this, and then you're handed something. You know, and it's kind of the nature of human beings that we can't figure out everything on our own, and we're often being handed stuff that we believe. I believe in the table of the elements. It was just handed to me in chemistry. I have not gone through all of those experiments to determine whether the table of the elements is accurate. I kind of trust that it is, you know? That's a belief, just handed to me. I took it. But there are other beliefs that kind of tear us apart, make it hard to be whole. And what I discovered in that moment is there can be trust in the light of understanding in oneself and in the discernment of the heart between wholesome and unwholesome. I'm not saying that you can trust everything inside yourself. No, there are a lot of thoughts. I certainly couldn't trust those thoughts that I was losing my soul. There are a lot of thoughts like that in all of us. You don't need to be raised in any particular religion to have them, or no religion. You could be filled with thoughts because you were raised with no religion, that may in some way not serve you, may not be actually bringing you into the light of your own discerning heart. See if you can begin to notice what those are. And I can't give you the formula for what happened there because it isn't something I did, the sense of I that we walk around in our head that thinks it's supposed to be in charge of everything, that actually wasn't what did this. I couldn't have willed it to happen. It arose spontaneously from the wisdom that was already here. You could call it divine grace, and I'd be completely happy with that. Except I want you to know that it didn't come from something outside. It was right here. It was a knowing, a wisdom that a kind of a gyroscope or compass, which we all carry around. And one way or another, we carry it around, but sometimes we don't use it. Sometimes we've even been seduced away from it by something that wanted to control us. This is the story of human beings, that they are often enculturated to not trust themselves so that they can be manipulated, they can be controlled. So coming to faith shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that. It should be coming into one's own deepest discernment, one's own deepest grounding in the truth. Though it's not necessarily a truth that the head can get its head around. It's not truth in the sense of statements. It's not truth in the sense of right opinions, necessarily. I taught a course to this group once. I don't know how many of you were in it. The title was Integrity. It's quite a few years ago. It'd be worth reteaching. Although there's no way to reteach one of these classes. They're all different. But it was about this discernment, which we have innately of wholesome and unwholesome, how we can feel the difference between the wholesome states and the unwholesome states that arise in us. We can discern the consequences when we act out of the unwholesome states as unwholesome and harmful. And we can discern the consequences when we act and we speak out of the wholesome states. It's all part of the system. It's our birthright. So I came to a faith in that. I came to a trusting in that. And that has some sort of consequence to it. And it may take me all 8 classes to articulate maybe only half of this, because it's hard to articulate. I was speaking with Kate, my wife, who works in hospice. She was talking about how various people meet death. And once in a while, she meets somebody who was raised in a very dogmatic kind of background, and suddenly in the face of death, it like crumbles. Their faith in that just kind of crumbles, and they're left with like terror. And I said, how sad. They never quite landed on true faith. And I found myself saying, a little bit to her, kind of practicing for this class, that faith is often found in one's ability to rest in not knowing, have not knowing be a not anxious experience, but a place of rest, where there's somehow a trust that there's a coherence to the world, even though I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to like carry it around in my head, what the meaning of life is, how it all works out, why people suffer, all of these big questions that people have. I don't have to necessarily carry around an answer to them in my head and debate people. There's a felt comfort with not knowing when there's a trust that my life fits into something bigger than me. There's a coherence here. There's a connection and a coherence, and I can trust that. And I don't need to always know. That would be, it seems to me, a good place to die from, go to face death from. That kind of trust. I don't know what I'm headed towards, but I have something that's more felt than thought. I have a felt sense of it's okay. It's going to be okay. I'm often uncertain how to communicate that okayness to people. When they can't find it in themselves. And in some ways, I certainly don't judge people who can't find it in themselves, because I know that that isn't something that one's ego can create for you. I should have faith, therefore I'm going to have faith. This egoic thing that has to be in charge, the one who thinks he or she is in charge, can't just manufacture it. That's why I trust it, actually, is because you can't manufacture it. And when I run into the manufactured variety, there's something about it doesn't feel right. It feels manufactured, like somebody's holding on to their beliefs tightly, afraid to let go. That isn't faith. That's fear. So you can't just will this to happen. You can't think your way into it. And, you hear someone like me that says, there's a knowing in you of this. And maybe you can't find that in yourself. And you go, I don't believe it. And I'm not actually asking you to believe me. Otherwise, I'd just be one of those people peddling belief, right? I'm trying to not peddle belief to you. I'm trying to point to an experience inside of yourself and suggest that at some moment, if not already, when some grace or something allows letting go to happen, you may touch this trust in being here, which we call faith, this trust that this is not by accident. And this coheres. You may trust that. You may touch that and trust it. And I sometimes think when I give these talks, in some ways I have to talk past your head. Because your head might go, I don't get it. I don't get what he's talking about. But there may be something inside you that goes, oh, he knows I'm real. He knows I'm in here. He knows there's actually a heart intelligence. Okay. This person doesn't, but he knows it. And maybe you'll feel a little something wake up, something like come out of its cave, like a bear in springtime and go, shake off the winter. It's like, oh my God, I've been in my cave. And you'll feel a little something of that trust come forth and be recognized. But I may have to talk mastermind to do it. See if there's any final word here, just to tie this up. The heart's freedom. Chitta Vimutti. The heart's freedom. Sutras talk about it. I don't claim to know the whole shebang, but I can give you this little taste of it today, of the heart's freedom from that sort of anxious doubt. By the way, there's one of the 5 hindrances in Buddhism is anxious doubt. I had a big spell of it on that 3-month retreat. But to land in a place that feels secure without it being attached to some fixed idea. There's incredible freedom there. Okay.